Okay, so this next video lecture is still the continuation of our Module 6 Expenditure Cycle 2 for our fixed assets. So we are now in the physical fixed asset system. Okay, for computer-based fixed asset system, so here it will demonstrate real-time processing. The top portion of the flow chart in the previous page represent the fixed asset acquisition procedures. Okay, and then we have here the center for the maintenance, and then the other one will be for the disposal procedure. So here, this is to simplify the flow chart and focus on the key features of the system. So that's why they omitted the steps for accounts payable and cash disbursement already, especially in the acquisition part. So for acquisition procedures, so the process will begin when the fixed asset accounting clerk receives the receiving report and the cash disbursement voucher. So these documents provide evidence that the firm has physically received the asset and show its cost. So here from the computer terminal, a clerk will create a record of this asset in the fixed asset subsidiary ledger. So in this case, I think accounts payable and disbursement or cash disbursement department was not emphasized because as we mentioned earlier, under the fixed asset transaction, this is considered to be a non-routine transaction. Okay, so that's why before it can be processed, an explicit authorization is needed before it can be processed. So that's why if there is already payment and receipt of the order, so meaning it has go through a rigid authorization process, okay, and also bidding before it was processed and approved. Okay, so that's why in this case it will begin now in the receiving part of the acquired fixed asset. So here from the computer terminal, a clerk will create a record to record this asset in the fixed asset subsidiary ledger. So in addition to the historical amount of the cost information, so the record will contain also data specifying the asset's useful life, its residual value, what depreciation method to be used, and the asset's location in the organization, and who has the custody over this fixed asset. So here, the system will automatically update also the fixed asset control account in our general ledger and will prepare the journal vouchers for the general ledger department as evidence of this entry. So the system will provide also reports for accounting management. So the fixed asset status report, it will show the cost, accumulated depreciation, if there is any, and the residual value for each of our firm's fixed assets. Based on the depreciation parameters contained in the fixed asset record, so here the system will prepare a depreciation schedule for us, okay, for each asset when it's acquired and was originally recorded. So the schedule is stored in the computer disk to permit future depreciation calculations. So this is the example of computer-based fixed asset system. Okay, so this is the fixed asset record structure. Okay, so it shows the item number, location, the description, asset type, useful life, cost, residual value, depreciation method, period or month, okay, when the entity holds this fixed asset, the retirement date, accumulated depreciation, and its corresponding book value. For asset maintenance, so the fixed asset system uses a depreciation schedule, okay, to record depreciation transactions automatically. So the specific task will include calculating the current depreciation, updating the accumulated depreciation and book value fields in our subsidiary records, and posting the total amount of depreciation to the affected general ledger accounts such as depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation in our balance sheet. And also to record the depreciation transaction by adding a record to the journal voucher file. Finally, a fixed asset depreciation report shown earlier is sent to the fixed asset department for review. So here, the department manager must report any changes if there is any change in custody or status of their fixed asset. From a computer terminal, a clerk will record such changes in the fixed asset subsidiary ledgers to reflect such changes. For our disposal procedure, so the disposal report, this formally authorizes the fixed asset department to remove from the ledger an asset that was already disposed of by the user department. When the clerk deletes the record from the fixed asset subsidiary ledger, the system automatically will post this as an adjusting entry to the fixed asset control account in our general ledger. Second, it will record any loss or gain which is associated with the disposal of this fixed asset. Third, they will prepare a journal voucher. So the fixed asset status report will contain details of the deletion. So this will be sent to the fixed asset department for review and verification. For controlling the fixed asset system. Okay, so because of the similarities between our fixed asset and expenditure cycle, many of the controls are the same. Okay, and were already discussed there in the first part. So our discussion for fixed asset control will focus on the three areas of the principal difference between these systems. So we will only focus on the authorization, supervision, and independent verification of our fixed asset system. For authorization, fixed asset acquisition should be formal and explicitly authorized as mentioned earlier. So each transaction should be initiated with a written request from the user department. In the case of high-value items, there should be an independent approval process that evaluates the merits of the request using the cost-benefit basis, okay, or analysis. Okay, this is to make sure that the cost of this high-value item will be compensated with the benefits that the entity will receive in the future. Okay, meaning benefit is greater than this high cost of the high-value item. In terms of supervision controls, because capital assets are widely distributed throughout the organization, they are more susceptible to theft and misappropriation than our inventories. Okay, because inventories are in the warehouse. Therefore, management supervision is an important element in our physical security for the fixed assets. So supervision or supervisors must ensure that fixed assets are being used in accordance with its policies and business practices. For example, microcomputers purchased for individual employees should be secured in their proper location and should not be removed from the premises without explicit approval also. Company vehicles should be secured in the organization's motor pool at the end of the shift and should not be taken home for personal use unless they are authorized by an appropriate supervisor. Okay, so this is an example of fixed asset depreciation report. Okay, so it has the heading, the code, the method for depreciation, the description, and depreciation expense. Okay, and other related details such as our general ledger summary account. And in terms of independent verification, so periodically, the internal auditor should review the asset acquisition and approval procedures. The purpose of this is to determine the reasonableness of factors used in the analysis, if that is acceptable and, of course, logical or that was properly approved. Okay, so this includes the useful life of the asset, the original financial cost, the proposed cost savings as a result of acquiring this asset, the discount rate used, the capital budgeting method used in the analysis, meaning if the analysis will actually be related to the presentation of the benefit, of the future benefit that this fixed asset will be providing to the entity. Okay, that's why we approved it. The internal auditor should verify also the location, the condition, and fair value of the fixed assets against the records. okay, in the subsidiary ledger. In addition, the automatic depreciation charges calculated by the system should also be reviewed and verified or recomputed by the internal auditors for accuracy and completeness. And system errors that miscalculate depreciation can result in the material misstatement of our operating expenses, reported earnings, and asset value. So that's why it's very important that the internal auditor should at least recalculate it, okay, to make sure that it's calculated correctly. Okay, so those are for our physical system of the fixed asset procedures.